My name is Scott Rader. I'm a professor of marketing and entrepreneurship here at the College of Business. I teach marketing and entrepreneurship, mostly social media marketing. Where I'm from is originally Northeast Tennessee, and I've been here at Western for almost 6 years now. I came across the Japanese program thanks to previous professor Takeda Sensei, who's no longer part of the program. He moved back to Japan. But I heard him speaking Japanese one day at Starbucks, and I know a little bit of Japanese, and so I turned around and started to have a conversation with him, and I found out he goes to Japan every year on a travel course, and he knew that he was going to have to leave at some point, so I kind of took the travel course over for him. So I teach it as a set of business classes, and we visit Japanese businesses and factories and whatnot. But any student is eligible to take that travel course and get credit for it. So I've done the travel course several times, not every year, but almost every year I'll take students over there. And I don't teach Japanese, and I'm not in the language program here at Western, but I'm good friends with Ono Sensei and Motohashi Sensei. Mm-hmm. We have lots of fun experiences from travel course. I think the most fun experience that we have, and I think most students would agree with this who've been, is unexpectedly it's the visits to the elementary school and the middle school in Naruto. So we visit a university that specializes in education, and part of their training is they have an attached set of schools, and so students get to go there and we get to walk around with first graders who take our hands and take a little tour around the school, and they're so excited to see foreigners. Maybe in some cases for the first time, and it's just a real pleasure. It's really charming. It's really cute. But we also learn right away how different Japan is based on just the primary education system. Students can see that really clearly when they visit an elementary school. So those are fun times. Really, really fun times in Japan is a lot of times nature. We get to go on hikes. Mm-hmm. We do a very small part of the Ohinro pilgrimage where we visit temples. And we hike through a really nice forested area, rural Japan, to do that. So I think pretty much every day is a fun time for the travel course. Japanese kind of chose me. I'll back up a little bit. I'm in my 40s, and children of the 80s, like myself, grew up before anime and before manga was popular. We may have had Speed Racer or something like that, but nobody really knew about Japan except for one thing, which was ninjas. Everybody was ninja crazy, and I remember very clearly I had a ninja outfit. I had plastic shuriken throwing stars. I had plastic nunchaku, which all these sort of ninja weapons. I mean, whatever. I was 10 years old, so everybody went crazy about ninja. We had ninja shows and ninja movies. That's actually, oddly enough, and I'm sure Japanese people would not necessarily be so proud of that, but it is clearly my earliest memory of Japan was watching those movies and seeing that sort of fantasy life of the ninja. The other thing that connected me to Japan was my household's choice of automobiles. So we're a very strong made in Japan car family. I know that's probably unpatriotic to some people, but it's what we could afford, and it's what suited our budget for the quality. So I grew up with, at the time, Datsuns, which is now Nissan, and Toyotas. And I remember my father, who's sort of this, I grew up in Northeast Tennessee on a farm. And so my father's really blue collar guy, very typical Northeast Tennessee guy, but he always respected those Japanese made vehicles because the quality was awesome. The price was right, and they were very fuel efficient. And I think the same thing can be said today. Maybe a little bit more relevant, I had Japanese friends once I started into college, around the same age as you and you guys. I had Japanese friends, probably like you do. They were exchange students, and I got to meet them. And it's kind of a long story, but I ended up going to Japan and living with a host family when I was in my 20s. So that began about a 20-year relationship now with lots of reasons. I go back to Japan now, but I go back and forth pretty often, at least once a year. Sometimes this year I'll be there for three different visits. So Japan's my second home. Wow. I don't know how else to say it, but it's like a second home to me. Yeah, actually in business. So it might not be a surprise to anyone to know that the Japanese are really, really good at manufacturing quality stuff, and they're really, really strong in terms of their management skill and their presence in the business world. Anybody who goes to business school will always learn Kaizen. So Kaizen is sort of Japanese practice of quality control and quality management. And it doesn't matter where you are in the world. If you're in the United States, or if you're in India, or if you're in China, you will have a textbook about Kaizen. You will understand what's, I guess, more formally known as Toyota quality management methods. And that has a direct impact on my teaching, because there's not a class that I teach where I don't bring in elements of Japanese quality control and Japanese management techniques. So I still go to Japan for work. I used to work there briefly. I worked in Japan for a company called Recruit. And they do a lot of things, but I was working on web design in Japan. And so these days, I still go back to do consulting in Japan, mostly around consumer research. I think the way I'd like to answer that question is to think about Japan as an analogy to a very mature person. Japanese culture, Japan as a country and Japanese culture have been around for thousands of years. So how long has the United States been around? A few hundred years, right? And so if you compare the maturity level, kind of think of Japan as this sort of ancient, wise, very patient, deeply rooted in their culture and their art society. And so we can learn a lot. We can learn a lot about Japan in terms of grace and humility. And I think the most powerful thing about Japan is the way that they communicate through context. And it's a very different way than Americans communicate. So the Japanese read between the lines, or you can think of it as they read the air. And so the direct message in a lot of cases is kind of impolite. So to understand Japan and Japanese culture, you have to understand how they pick up things on the periphery and on the edges. And there's something very beautiful and very subtle and very nuanced about that. Yes, I do. I would highly encourage Japanese students to understand Japanese culture. I think that's pretty obvious. You'll do that by learning the language. But one of the best ways to understand Japanese culture, in my opinion, is through literature and film. So I'm a nerd, I'm a bookworm. I love to read books, as you can probably see. But I think one of the quicker ways to understand Japan's culture is to watch movies. And I'm not talking about anime and manga. Although I do appreciate those art forms. There's nothing wrong with those ways of understanding Japan, but that's kind of Japanese pop culture to a large extent. I would really recommend that students go watch. The library may have some of these, or you can probably find them online. What I would call classic traditional Japanese films, particularly from the 1940s, 1950s, 1960s. Probably everybody knows Akira Kurosawa. Kurosawa-san is a very great filmmaker, but I would actually recommend Ozu, and maybe Shinoda, and maybe Kon Ichikawa, if you want to really understand sort of Japanese history and the psychology of Japanese people. Those are really good movies to watch. ありがとうございました。